Alright, so I was working away at my promised another simple favor video, which is still coming, but then I went to see the Thunderbolts and it kinda derailed my day. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean that in a, oh no, I didn't expect this movie to make me cry type of way. And not in the way that Infinity War had me tearing up, I mean in the way like something After Sun makes me cry. And that's because of what this movie's dealing with. I thought best case scenario for this, it was gonna feel like James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie, you know, pretty fun and you get the gang rallying for redemption, and in some ways, yes. But there is some real heart in this movie that I haven't seen since, well, honestly, since James Gunn. And Guardians 3 was an outlier in a sea of movies descending into the hellscape that Marvel's been. So this movie isn't going to be like a super extensive point-by-point review. I will go through the major plot beats in a bit. I will give you a spoiler warning. Might get pretty extensive in the final act just to like explain why what I think it's doing is doing it so well. But this is just largely going to be a vibes video for a while. So it's not surprised that the MCU's been in a little bit of a tailspin since Endgame. They tried pumping out too many shows at once to the point that I don't even remember which one was the last one I cared to sit through. I still haven't even caught up on Agatha, and that has gay vibes. So you know I'm just a little done with it. Still haven't seen the new Captain America. I thought Deadpool and Wolverine was fine. And honestly, that was mostly because of the X-Men nostalgia, because those first two movies meant the world to me as a kid. But for some reason, I had hope for Thunderbolts. I love Florence Pugh, I love the Yelena character, and that was enough to get me on board. But oh my god, this movie hit in a time where I guess I needed it? Or maybe not needed it. Maybe I would just rather ignore so much of this, you know, just like Yelena says kind of early on in the movie. You gotta push that down, push all those feelings down so deep. I'm joking, don't do that. It is still funny, don't get me wrong. It actually has a few scenes with some really solid action choreography, which is where things lose me a lot of the times in these movies, as really great performances from so much of the cast. But it's doing so much more than I expected it to. I'm not saying it's the best movie Marvel's ever made by any stretch of the imagination, but it's really quite good in so many ways. It just feels like somebody actually cared to make a solid movie first and foremost without 100% using it as a cameo vessel. And if what it's going through resonates with you, it is really gonna resonate with you. But before I get too heavy, let's just run through some of the basics of what the movie even is, you know, mostly spoiler free here, just the trailer vibes. I don't think you need to have seen the last Captain America movie or Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It'll probably make you care about some of these characters a little bit more and give you more context, like who John Walker is and why Bucky is a congressman now, but they work you through enough of the details fast enough that you'll be fine. Like I had a vague idea that John Walker was supposed to be this replacement Captain America, but even if you didn't, they will make sure you're caught up soon enough. But we pick up with Yelena doing a series of missions for Valentina, which is pretty much where we left her in that end credit scene. And what she's been hired to do is destroy a bunch of files at Oxcorp, specifically anything to do with the Sentry project. And whatever that is serious enough that Valentina's facing impeachment from her position as director of the CIA because of her heavy involvement in Oxcorp, which has been linked to a variety of illegal activity, including human experimentation, because they want to make a new super person to make up for the loss of the Avengers in the world, but you know, specifically one that she can control. That's the quiet part she's not saying out loud. But when you're as arrogant as she is, something is bound to go wrong, and that's how our unlikely band of killers gets sucked in after she fails to take them out as an extension of the loose ends she's hired them to destroy. Now, the trailer and a lot of the marketing I saw really just seemed to be promoting this as a redemption movie, and that maybe makes up like 10% of the vibe of this movie. Like, there are definitely some characters that are aligning with that more, but they're not like the central focus most of the time. This really is more dealing with inner demons, and I love that. Right from the opening scene, we have Yelena talking about this void she feels inside herself, this broken feeling and emptiness. Their life has just stopped feeling like it has a purpose.
There's something wrong with me.
Me honestly walking around looking like this 90% of the time though? I actually recently just paid money to dangle off a really high building. We're the same. I get that I'm not an international hired killer with skeletons in my closet, or am I? But point being, it doesn't matter who you are or what you've done. If that darkness wants to find you, it's gonna find you. And this movie is actually tackling that directly and dealing with how not to let those feelings win, which is honestly so damn refreshing for the MCU. From one line in this movie, I was like, oh shit, this is gonna do something to me. Because not to be too much on Maine, I've not been having the best time lately, to the point that I've turned down some really cool opportunities because I'm genuinely worried about spiraling out. And that really sucks that sometimes my brain just doesn't want to cooperate. Don't worry, I am getting help for that, but sometimes it just takes time, and if you're feeling anything remotely similar, please reach out to someone. Any anyone, I will link some resources down below. But to build on that more, we are going to go into spoilers, but first, just to tie up some non-spoiler thoughts. I really like the cast, huge Florence Pugh fan, Wyatt Russell is always great, Pullman did a fantastic job. It's not my favorite Sebastian Stan role, but Bucky's cool. David Harbour as Alexei is fantastic because his energy is just so enthusiastic. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is just such a fun antagonist. Unfortunately, Ghost and Bucky end up overshadowed a lot because of how strong those other personalities are, but still delightful. And a little shout out to Geraldine Viswanathan, who played Valentina's assistant in this, and I always find her to be an underrated delight. Now, the other antagonist is a very layered character that is both sympathetic and incredibly terrifying, but the real enemy here is just people's brains and how they can cause the most damage. Now, for those unaware, the superpowered antagonist in this movie is Sentry, and I really like how they handled him as a character because they went right for the version of Sentry that has fairly severe mental health issues, which absolutely plays into his behaviors and how he ends up using his powers. Again, really solid fight scenes, good character chemistry, and at the end it kind of feels like Marvel is poking fun at themselves for how they tried to move forward after Endgame. And I think that's a step in the right direction for them right now. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit more. It is not just Sentry that's going to be going through it in this movie. As mentioned, it is largely focused on Yelena and her depression. Feeling lost and finally giving in to go visit Papa, who hasn't reached out to her in a year. And he's also given up on the hero thing right now. He's not even running the mercenary lifestyle. He runs the Red Guardian limo service. But even with his life looking like a total disaster, he still has so much of his spirit. And instantly noticed that Yelena's lost hers, that there's this light that's normally in her that is just gone. And holy shit, if that doesn't hit and feels like what people said to me as a teenager, you know, not maliciously, but like out of genuine concern. And yeah, that's what it can feel like. Like there's this thing inside you that's just been completely snuffed out and there's nothing you can do about it. And I feel like this movie is doing such a good job expressing those ideas verbally, but also like visually expressing them. Like the opening scene has the Marvel title just starts draining out the audio before the logo gets consumed by blackness and just cuts to Yelena going through it. Thought that was very cool and immediately set a tone. But at Alexei's encouragement, she calls Valentina and says that after this last job, she wants to move into different projects. She wants to do things she can feel good about. Problem being that this was really supposed to be her last job. As mentioned, Valentina's hired a lot of mercenaries to deal with the loose ends of the Sentry project, and that means that they are also loose ends. So she essentially hires each one of them to take out one of the other mercenaries, all at the last base that they would need to destroy. And I really liked the scene. I thought the fight choreography gave everyone a chance to really shine with their own abilities. They do lay Taskmaster out almost immediately, never to be mentioned again. I'd almost be offended if I got invited back to just do this. And editor AJ pointed out that this felt extra weird because Natasha was the one that brought her back, but now they just killed her again. And then they immediately have John and Ghost looting her gear. But in the fight, they wake someone up, someone named Bob. But this is going to be Sentry, the result of human testing to create a singular hero that Valentina would have control over. And if there's one thing the boys have taught us, it's that hero work can be weaponized in so many ways. But everyone who went through the testing died, which is half the reason she needs to cover this all up, except for Bob here, who she didn't even know about because he's supposed to be dead and for some reason was just stored in a pod. No, he doesn't really know what's going on with himself yet. He just knows he signed up for a medical procedure and it was supposed to just make him better and valuable, and then doesn't really remember anything until he wakes up. Says that he has a lot of episodes that just make him black out and forget things. But there's definitely something going on with him because anytime he touches someone, it just seems to bop them into a mental prison of their darkest memories and biggest shames. Like Yelena sent right back to her initiation as a child where she had to manipulate another kid into a situation to be murdered. John gets shown his own neglect of his family that ends up losing him his family for neglecting his kid after losing his replacement Captain America title. And John's a real personality. He's a very fun asshole, and honestly, he's the reason why I will probably go back and watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But they do manage to escape this place and Valentina's agents, but it's only because Bob tried to sacrifice himself. The boy had so much darkness in him, he was fine going out if it meant they could escape because Yelena showed him a modicum of kindness. They had a whole conversation about understanding the darkness inside, but unfortunately, the only advice she had to give was just to, push it down and ignore it. But surprise, Bob here is completely invulnerable to bullets. Then he starts flying, then crashing, putting him right under Valentina's control, and she goes the route of nurturing him and dangling purpose, which is what he wants. He sees that Sentry logo and he wants to be someone. He wants to matter. Again, this is a guy with pretty severe mental health issues. He mentioned doing meth for a while and was in Malaysia just wandering around trying to solve his problems. Not that it's a competition, but the boy was down bad, as the kids say. or said, I'm old. My light just shut off. But yeah, with blackout periods, extreme highs and lows, he's probably not the prime candidate for world hero. And I feel like I haven't really had a chance to mention Bucky yet. Again, he was apparently running for Congress in the Captain America movie and got it, which he obviously hates, and he's doing everything in his power to take down Valentina before he just gives up and goes rogue, captures the gang after Red Guardian found them in the desert to use them as witnesses against her, until he finds out about Bob. Because Valentina's assistant Mel, who's been in conversation with him, realizes that Bob was only ever intended to be a test subject, not the guy. But because he's the only guy that survived, he's gonna be the guy for Valentina. But the problem with telling someone who has episodes and extreme highs and lows that he's invincible, stronger than an entire team of Avengers, setting him up to be the hero of the world, is that he's really gonna take that to heart. So when the Thunderbolts show up to see him in all his Sentry glory for Valentina's trap to debut him as a hero that stopped these dangerous criminals, bury the boys, Yelena's pretty devastated and tries to reason with him, but he just lays them all out like it's nothing. Never even really being the aggressor, because even when he lets them get hits on him, it doesn't do a thing. Like, he's not just invincible, he seems invulnerable. But also immediately shows that he is not the robot that she needs him to be. Won't kill them at her orders because he doesn't see them as a threat. And then starts to wonder why a god would be taking orders from anyone. And I really loved his logic here. She kind of set him up for it. If he's all powerful and stronger than a team of Avengers that includes God, what does that make him? Now, Valentina was smart enough to have a kill switch implemented in him, which should have left him dead, but it did so much worse. It basically just locked him in his own mind and made way for his void to take over, which just feels so thematically on point for the rest of this movie. And it's pretty terrible. He's just this like pitch black, literally void of color or anything other than his glowing eyes, vaporizing people into these instant black shadows. It's terrifying. Now, just before he starts doing this, Yelena blames herself because she left him behind thinking he was dead, and snaps when they're like, what's the new plan? Because she says that they're all losers and bad people and that there's nothing they can do, that Alexei abandoned her and that John's a piece of shit. But as confident as he is outwardly, Alexei literally sees himself so poorly that he didn't think she'd want him to reach out. But then gives her such a great perspective when she's just talking about all the things she feels are wrong, that she just spends all of her time thinking of all the bad things she's done before she has to go to work and do more bad things, and then drinking until she sleeps and doing it all over again. That she has nothing in life anymore. And they express this in a way that both feels specific to her, but also could be applied to anyone watching. The people spend so much of their free time avoiding things, looking at their phones, then going to work, and then turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms every day. And I like that they didn't shy away from that. I think a lot of movies that show what a solitary life looks like maybe try to convey that it's bad, but so many of those people just end up coming across looking badass and dedicated for the mission of the movie, so you just kind of forget the shit lives they have outside that. This lets Yelena be the badass, but then has an honest conversation about that solitude. And your brain will just get to a point that it stops trying to make any connections at all. And again, Alexei brings it back to how she used to light up a room when she was a kid, and her not remembering what it's like to feel that way or how to get it back. It's just so incredibly relatable to so many people. And sometimes it's hurtful to have people say that to you because your brain won't let you get back to it. But he ends it off with something more concrete that applies to the now. And it's why she wanted to be the goalie for her soccer team, the Thunderbolts. That's how they got the name for this movie. They kind of made a joke and Alexei ran with it. But she said it was so she could be the one that everyone could rely on if they made a mistake. And that's still who she is, even if she doesn't feel it.
Okay, that was really good.
This movie is dealing with so many serious things. Like, he obviously has his own demons, but he's just this like ball of enthusiasm, and I love it because it never gets to the point where it feels dismissive of reality or toxic positivity. It's just comforting. But now it's time for the destruction from the void. And they do manage to save a lot of people, bringing it back to that friendly neighborhood level I love so much. They even get some claps until all those people start getting vaporized. Like, literally, this little 6-year-old girl gets blasted right after Alexei saves her. Wild inclusion. And that darkness void just starts to spread. This is the manifestation of Bob's darkest feelings. The literal emptiness influenced by Yelena's words about everyone being alone. And Yelena just walks into it. At first I was like, yeah, girl, I get it, tempting. And maybe there's a little bit of nihilism there for her that's like, okay, if it goes bad, whatever, but when he touched me earlier, it just kind of put me in my own brain. So, maybe there's a chance that going in is the only way to get to Bob. So she starts working through her memories and they start attacking her back, getting to one of her passed out drunk on the floor and the shame she feels in that until she finds Bob. Locked in his own mind, no control over anything that's happening, like all the bad days that made him feel like nothing mattered manifested. And yes, of course, this is playing out as a physical thing in the real world right now, but it's absolutely a deeper conversation about mental health at the same time. Like, it is directly dealing with mental health, not just as like an allegory or a metaphor, like it's doing it. And Yelena's really there to be the encouragement to keep fighting despite all of the horrible feelings, the depression, the loneliness, the emptiness, and it's kind of the encouragement for both Bob to not let it take over, but also to anyone watching. That she was wrong and that you can't stuff down those feelings, you can't hold them alone, and that even if reaching out to someone doesn't fix everything, it will start to feel lighter. We live in a time where people, including myself, like to handle this stuff with dark and self-deprecating humor, and that's fine to a point, but it's nice to be reminded that you can be earnest when you need help. And I hope none of you forget that. Now, thankfully, Ghost was smart enough to realize that Yelena might be inside and not dead, so they bop in just in time to save them from Bob's mind and realize that the only way to find the void is by going to the worst room he has. They do take a detour through the room where he is the sign-spinning chicken on meth that he mentioned, and I did appreciate that. You know, there's never humor to undercut a serious moment about mental health, but when the action's going, sure. But the worst room is actually the one Yelena was tasked with destroying at the beginning, where you could see vaporized bodies on the other side of the door, the room he was tested on, which is where they find the void. And at first it seems like this has to be a straight up fight, that Bob has to physically beat his demons and it'll translate mentally. But it very quickly becomes obvious that that anger and rage is just leading to more emptiness. It's trying to convince Bob that he's completely alone, that he doesn't matter to anyone. Literally a fight with the worst parts of his brain, that like horrible inner voice that so many people have, until Yelena manages to get to him just to let him know that she's there, as the rest of them manage to make it to him too, that he's not alone and they're out. I'm sure some people are disappointed that this wasn't some like bigger, large scale fight, but I think they had enough satisfying fights earlier on in the movie. This is how this needed to go. But they do something here I didn't love. He doesn't remember any of what just happened, which I think sucks. Like, he's feeling all right, but that was some amazing therapy in there, which is just gone. But this leads into the grand finale, Valentina announcing them as the new Avengers. No idea why she isn't being arrested. I feel like Bucky in particular wouldn't be going along with this, but whatever. Yelena's like, yeah, we own you now, bitch. Yeah, that's why there's an asterisk at the end of Thunderbolts. It's asterisk, actually, they're the new Avengers. And honestly, yeah, that was a nice way to handle that. The credits then work through a bunch of news articles that are largely criticizing them, saying that they're not the real Avengers, how some people might be okay with them, that you just can't tell people who the new Avengers are. It really kind of felt like a self-dig at what they've been trying to do since Endgame. They even toss in that Sam, aka the Falcon or the new Captain America, and Bucky are kind of feuding, that he's going to sue them for copyright infringement on the name. Wild times. But that leads to the bigger part of this end credit scene, which I thought was really good. This is all taking place 14 months later. They're dealing with this new kinda Avengers status. Bob can't tap into the Sentry stuff, but they've got him around because we support the homies. I saw some people confused that he's just here, but like, did you watch the movie that stressed the importance of support networks and human connection? But whatever, they notice an anomaly in space, and it's the Fantastic Four ship. Just the right kind of teaser, very satisfying to have the end credit scene directly tie into the movie we just watched, and that we know that the next movie is already coming, unlike the last like handful of years where like they haven't even filmed the movie before they do the end credits scene. And yeah, honestly, I think the Fantastic Four movie looks pretty good too. I assume they're in another multiverse and then something happens in that movie to bop them into the MCU timeline. So I'm interested to see how that turns out. But yeah, that is the Thunderbolts. It hit me in the damn feels while also being a solid Marvel movie. Let me know what you guys are thinking down below. I really like that they managed to keep it largely small scale for how big that threat could have been, and they really just focused on that relationship and mental health aspect more. Again, I will have resources linked down below for anyone who might be struggling. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'll be mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.